Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and we will be learning today in Yirtzeh Hashem. We have to complete Daf Samach Tes Amud Aleph, and we will do Samach Tes Amud Beis, at least a good part of it as well. Yesterday's shir was a little bit on the lengthy side. I think today's shir will be a little bit on the shorter side. So we pick up on Samach Tes Amud Aleph, 3 lines off the bottom. Siman Kuf Samach Ches Sif Yud Gimel. We are continuing to learn Hilchas B'tzias Hapas. Before we begin, our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanusuna Batzara B'Shivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Bein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yerachem Aleihem V'Yetziam Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'afel L'Oira U'Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagala Uzman Kariv V'Nemar Amen. Also, our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalema for Ariel Yosef ben Miriam Rezel and Meir ben Chayes Sarah, who are in need of Rachamei Shamayim. So, let's begin over here. Sif Yud Gimel, says the Mechaber. Afilu davar sheblilosai, and right away the Ramah inserts over here, what is the translation of sheblilosai? Pirush, the word blilosai, which means to mix. The word blilosai in context over here means lishas hakemach b'mayim, the kneading of the flour together with the water. So the Mechaber says, afilu davar sheblilosai ava, even a baked product that has a thick, heavy, dough-like mixture. So you're actually forming a dough, like when you make challah, right? You mix water and flour. You come up with a nice, heavy, thick dough. When you make a yeast cake, you produce a very heavy, thick dough. That is blilosai ava. It's a kneaded and mixed, thick, heavy dough. The way the Rishonim describe the difference between blila ava, a heavy mixture, and a blila raka, a light mixture, is that a blila raka is a liquid-like batter. So it's like a cake batter. You mix up a cake in the mixer, and then you take it and you pour it into a 9x13 tin. A pancake batter. You mix up a pancake batter, you take a ladle, and then you pour it out into a frying pan. A blila ava is a challah dough, a yeast cake dough. Those are blila ava. Says the Mechaber, afilu davar sheblilosai ava. Even if you have a dough, which is blilosai ava. Now, right away, when we have a blila ava dough, that is very bread-like. It's like a bread dough. Says the Mechaber, im bishla oitigna, if you cook it in water or you fry it in oil. So bishla means you cooked it in water. Tigna means you fried it in oil. Ein mevarich aleh hamaitzi, you no longer will make hamaitzi on that product. Afilu sheyesh aleh teresa denama, even if the final product has teresa denama, even if it looks bread-like, still you are not going to make hamaitzi. You're only going to make mezainos. And continues the Mechaber, this is true. Va'afilu neschayva b'chala, even if you have produced a dough that you're chayiv to be mafresh challah from. So what the Mechaber is telling you over here is, in this case, where you made a blila ava, you made a dough that, where there are a lot of indicators that would seem to indicate a bracha of hamaitzi. Number one, it's a blila ava. It's a very heavy bread-like dough. Number two, it might have teresa denama. After you boil it or after you fry it, the final product might even have teresa denama. It might be a dough that's chayiv and challah. We know bread. If you bake enough bread, you have to be mafresh challah. It could be you're going to produce a dough over here that's actually chayiv and challah. Still, even though you have all of these indicators that are pointing to hamaitzi, over here, since you did not bake the final product, instead you boiled it or you fried it, the bracha on the final product is going to be hamaitzi, is going to be mezainos, and not hamaitzi. So again, Reading it in the Mechaber, afilu davar sheblilosai ava, even if you produce a thick, heavy dough, a dough that you cannot pour, a solid dough, im bishla oitigna, if you boil or fry the final product, ein mevarach aleh hamaitzi, you do not make a bracha rishayna of hamaitzi, and this is true, afilu sheyesh aleh terisa denama, even if the final product has the appearance of bread, va'afilu neschayva bechala, and even if you have produced a dough where you are chayiv to be mafresh chala, the birkas hamaitzi einay hoylech ela achar shas afiyah, because the determining factor of the bracha of hamaitzi is afiyah. According to this first opinion recorded over here in the Mechaber, this is Rabbeinu Yoina, Rabbi Yerucham, others. According to this first opinion, the determining factor of the bracha rishayna of hamaitzi is baking. If you produce the final product using any other cooking method other than baking, that is not going to result in hamaitzi. Now, when we talk about baking, we assume right away that that means putting the dough into an oven. I want to point out right now that there is another form of baking, and that is if you would take the dough and you would put the dough into a dry frying pan. So you put the dough into a dry pan, no liquid, no water, no oil. Or even if you would take a little oil spray and you would just put a very small, minute amount of oil on the bottom of the pan, which is only there to prevent the dough from catching to the pan, that is also called baking. That's not called frying. Frying is where there's a substantial amount of oil, where you're seeking to cook the dough, to fry the dough in oil. In the case that I just gave you, you're not trying to cook the dough or fry the dough in oil. You're just applying a small amount of oil to the surface of the pan to prevent the dough from catching. That's called baking. So now, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is cut in Samach Zayin. Sheblilosei ava, hainu, what does this mean? A blila ava, a thick mixture. Hainu, la'achar sheyatzak hamayim l'saycha kemach, after you pour water into the flour, losh oisa, you knead it, av, and you make it thick, k'may pas, like a bread dough. Ois cut in Samach, the Mechaber in this first opinion said, im bishla, if you cooked the dough or fried the dough. Says the Chavetz Chaim, bishul b'mayim. Bishla means you cooked it in water. V'tigun, and when the Mechaber says tigna, that means frying b'shemen in oil. Ois cut in Samach tes, ein mevarech, you do not make hamaitzi. You only make a mezainos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is true. Afilu al prusais sheyesh b'hem kazayis. This is true even if you produce loaves that are larger than a kazayis. This is not similar to the halacha that we had earlier in Sif Yud, where we learnt that if you take pieces of bread that are a kazayis or larger and you cook them, they become downgraded to a mezainos. Over here, we're saying, if you produce a blila ava dough and you take a piece that's larger than a kazayis, and now you go ahead and you cook it, according to this first opinion, the bracha is going to be mezainos. In Sif Yud, we said, if you take a piece of bread that's larger than a kazayis and you cook it, it remains hamaitzi. So you see, this is the discrepancy that the Chavetz Chaim is addressing over here. Again, in Sif Yud, we said, if you have a piece of bread that's larger than a kazayis, now you go ahead and you cook it, and it's still larger than a kazayis after you cook it, what bracha do you make? You make the bracha of hamaitzi, because it was bread, it was 100% genuine bread, and even though you cooked it, and you might have lost to Teresa Denama, since it's larger than a kazayis, the bracha remains hamaitzi. Over here we're saying, if you produce a blila ava dough, and you take a chunk that's bigger than a kazayis, and you go ahead and you cook it, the bracha is going to be mezainos, not hamaitzi. So the Chavetz Chaim now explains the difference between these two halachas. Says the Chavetz Chaim, our case over here, where you're cooking a blila ava dough that's larger than a kazayas, is not similar to the halacha that we learned in Sif Yud. The habishal ein mevatal isam b'teres lechem. In Sif Yud, we were talking about something that was bread. You have actual bread that was baked, and now you took it and you cooked it. Since you have a piece that's bigger than a kazayas, we say that the cooking does not take away the shem lechem from that bread. The hasam hevi lechem gomer meikara shaya ofui. Over there in Sif Yud, we were talking about genuine bona fide bread that was baked. Masha eiket hacha. But contrast that to the halacha that we're learning over here in Sif Yud Gimel, Daloi nefa me'olam. Over here we're talking about dough that was never baked. We're talking about a blila ava dough that you are now boiling. It was never baked. And since it was never baked, it never gets teres lechem. Lahachi abishol va'atigun mevatlam teres lechem. Over here where you're dealing with dough that was never baked, the fact that you take it now and cook it or fry it makes that it's not going to have teres lechem. Lechem is baked. Lechem is not boiled. Lechem is not fried. Now you're thinking about bagels. We'll get to bagels, but bagels are different because bagels are boiled and then baked. And they're baked before they are fully cooked. So yes, you flash boil them, but then you go ahead and you finish them by baking. So that's real bona fide pas. Over here, we're talking about a product where you take a blila ava and you only boil it or fry it, like a donut. The Chavetz Chaim says, take a look later on in Sif Yodalit in the words of the Ramah. If you take a pan and you put a little coating of oil on it, and the only purpose of that coating is shelo yisarei for isa, is that the dough shouldn't catch and burn. Loi mikri tigun b'mashke, that's not called frying it in a beverage. Vehevi afia gemura, that is 100% baking. Ois kat ayin, Teresa Denama, the Mechaber told us, if you take this blila ava dough and you boil it or you fry it, even if it has Teresa Denama, even if the finished product looks bread-like, still it's a mezainos and not hamoitzi because it was not baked. Teresa Denama, and says the Chavetz Chaim, va'afilu akal harbe, the kavas udase alein. Even if you eat a lot of this product, even if you're kaveh suda on the product, it's still only going to be a mezainos. This is not like pasa babakistin. Pasa babakistin is pas. So if you kaveh suda on it, if you eat enough of it, the bracha could go up to hamoitzi. Over here, this boiled or fried product is not pas. And therefore, it doesn't matter how much you eat. It's always going to remain a mezainos. Hevikamai daisa, this is like a grain cereal, which is always a mezainos. Umavarach bar yamina mezainos lefanea, the bracha rishayna is bar yamina mezainos, umei ein shalosh la'achareha, and the nach bracha, the bracha achrayna, is an alamichya, not birkas hamazon. Ois kat ayin aleph, the Mechaber said this is true, even if you have another indicator that the final product over here should be hamoitzi. What's that indicator? That you produced a dough where you're chayv to be mafresh challah. We know that when you bake bread, when you bake challah, you have to be mafresh challah. So it could be over here with your blila ava dough, you might have produced a dough that is mechayev you to be mafresh challah, and yet, when you now take that dough and boil it or fry it, the bracha on the final product is going to be mezainos, not hamoitzi. Says the Mishnah Berurah, "Afilu nischayva b'chala." Ritzayna loymar, what the Mechaber wants to say is, "Afilu hu be'inyan shekari lechem le'inyan chala." Even if you produce a dough where we are going to call that dough a lechem dough in the context of your chiyuv to be mafresh chala, still the bracha on the final boiled or fried product is going to be mezainos. Now, what is this case where you make a blila ava dough that you're chayiv to be mafresh challah, and then you're going to boil it and fry it, and come up with a final product on which the bracha is mezainos? What is that case? Says the Mishnah Berurah, I'll tell you what that case is. Kigayin, for example, Shabishas Lisha, when you kneaded this dough, Lo yahaya b'daitoi levashloi oy letagnoi. You went in and you made a dough. You were intending on making a baked dough. So you went and you needed flour with water, and you needed a blila avado with the intent to bake it. Right now, you have a chiyuv to be mafresh challah. Then, v'achakach nimlach. Then later on, after you were mafresh challah, you changed your mind and you decided to boil it or fry it. Now, really, in retrospect, you wouldn't have had a chiyuv of challah. But over here, you did have a chiyuv of challah because when you first kneaded the dough, there landed on the dough a chiyuv of challah because your intent was to bake it. Shehu chay b'challah l'divrei hakoil k'mavur b'yoredei sibit shel chavtes afilu hachi eida b'varach hamoitzi. Ice cut 9 bays. The Mechaber explained what is the underpinning of this first shita in the Mechaber that says that if you make a blila ava and you boil it or you fry it, the bracha on the final product is a bezaydes and not a hamoitzi. The underpinning is because the determining factor of the bracha rishon of hamoitzi is shas afiyah. It's when you go ahead and you bake it. In order for this product to have a bracha rishona of hamoitzi, it must be a baked product. Can't be a fried product or a boiled product. Because according to this shita, bread is only when it's baked. The kevin shaloi nefa betanor, and since this final product over here was never baked in an oven, instead it was boiled or fried, nor was it baked in a pan without liquid, ein shem lechem aleh. It's not called lechem, and therefore the bracha is not hamoitzi, it's bezonos. Mashe ein kein le'inyan challah, but this is not true in the context of the chiyuv of challah. By challah, hakoil hoilech achar gilgal hakemach b'mayim. By challah, the determining factor of whether or not you have to be mafresh challah, that is determined at the time that you need the dough. If you needed the dough and you needed a blila avo with the intent to bake it, you have a chiyuv of challah as soon as you generated that dough. The chiyuv of challah is not going to go off l'mafreya retroactively when you go ahead and you boil the dough or fry the dough. So just to be clear over here, we're contrasting over here two different halachas. We're contrasting the halacha of the bracha rishona of hamoitzi and the bracha achrona of birkas hamazon and the chiyuv of hafrashas challah. In order to have a bracha of hamoitzi and a noch bracha of birkas hamazon, you have to have a lechem. In order to be chayiv in hafrashas challah, you have to have lechem. You would think if somebody mixes up a blila ava and he does it having in mind that he's going to bake it, so right now he has a chiyuv of hafrashas challah, you would think if this dough has a chiyuv of hafrashas challah, so if I take a piece of this, that means it's lechem. So now if I take a piece and I boil it or I fry it, it should be hamoitzi. Says the Mechaber, no, it's not that way. Why? Because the determining factor of hamoitzi and the determining factor of a chiyuv of hafrashas challah are not the same. The chiyuv of hafrashas challah lands on the dough when you produce the dough. So if you produce a blila ava, and you produce a blila ava with the intent of baking it, then right now I have in front of me a dough that is chayiv in hafrashas challah. Why? Because it's a lechem dough. It's a blila ava, and my intent is to bake it. So right now it has a chiyuv challah. So I must be mafresh challah. Now, if an hour later, after the dough rises, I change my mind and I decide now I want to bake it or fry it, I'm allowed to go ahead and bake it and fry it, and it doesn't retroactively remove the chiyuv of hafrashas challah, because the chiyuv of hafrashas challah landed on this dough when I kneaded it into a blila ava with the intent to bake it. It got a hafrashas challah. It got a chiyuv of hafrashas challah. Masha ein kain, when it comes to the bracha rishon of hamaitzi and the bracha achroin of brekas hamazon, over there the determining factor is the final product. What did I do? I took the blila ava, very nice. I'm not dealing now with the chiyuv of bracha rishon. I'm not eating the dough, right? The determining factor of what the bracha rishon is going to be dependent on what the final product is. You made a blila ava dough. If you stick it in an oven and bake it, or you stick it in a frying pan without any oil, without any liquid and bake it, so then fine. So then the final product is lechem, and it's going to be hamaitzi and brekas hamazon. But if you take it and you drop it into a deep fryer, or you drop it into a pot full of water and you boil it, so then the final product is not lechem. The final product is something else. It's a donut. It's sufkadiot, but it's not lechem. Since it's not lechem, it's not hamaitzi. It's mezainos. Okay. So that was the first opinion. But now, here on Samach Tesam Beis, the Mechaber brings down a dissenting opinion. This is the Shitas Rabbeinu Tam brought down in Tosfos. Says the Mechaber, V'yesh chalkim. However, there are those who disagree with this. V'oimrim, and they say, the chol shetchila se'isa ava, whenever you have a blila ava, whenever you mix up something into a heavy dough, a bread-like dough, and here the girsa in the Mechaber gets a little bit iffy, afilu rikecha achakach b'mayim, and I'm going to translate this the way the Bir Halacha understands it. In Bir Halacha Divra Maschal afilu rikecha ubishla, says the Mechaber, if you make, according to this yesh chalkim, if you make a blila ava, afilu rikecha achakach b'mayim, even if you go ahead and you cook it later in water, va'asa sufganin, and you make it like something called sufganin, sufganiot, anyone? Pirish, what does that mean, sufganin? Isa, a dough, shalashua, that you kneaded, va'asa'uha kimin svoig, and then you made it into something which is sponge-like. We'll get back to that in a minute. Ubish shebishla b'mayim, the Bir Halacha takes out that vav and makes it a shin. Shebishla b'mayim, that you went in and you cooked this dough in water, or you tigna b'shemen, or you fried it in oil. Mevarech aleim hamaitzi. This Yesh Cholkim says that the bracha is hamaitzi. Now, with all of these fancy words over here, what the Mechaber seems to be saying is like this. The Yesh Cholkim says the determining factor of hamaitzi is the blila ava. You made a blila ava, you have a thick, heavy dough. I don't care now if you baked it, or you boiled it, or you fried it. If you made a blila ava, and then you somehow went ahead and produced a cooked, fried, or baked final product that has a Teresa Denama, the bracha is hamaitzi. That's the sheet of the Yesh Cholkim, arguing on the first opinion. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Gimel Yesh Cholkim. What's the underpinning? What's the rationale of this Yesh Cholkim? Says the Chavetz Chaim, the Svira Lahu, they hold the Kevan Demei Kara Haya Blilasei Ava, because since at the outset this mixture was a blila ava, it was a heavy, thick dough. Va'ata isbei tar lechem, and now once you've finished preparing it, either through frying it or boiling it, it has tayar lechem, it has the appearance of bread, mavar chamaitzi, you make hamaitzi. And this would be true that the bracha would be hamaitzi, even if you only snack on it. You don't have to be kaveh suda, the same way you don't have to be kaveh suda on rye bread in order for rye bread to be hamaitzi. If you eat a kol shehu of bread, the bracha rishona is hamaitzi. So too, according to this Yesh Cholkim, if you eat a kol shehu of a fried blila ava or a boiled blila ava, the bracha would be hamaitzi. Why? The lechem gomer hu l'didu, because according to this shita, this is mamish lechem. Ukidlekaman b'haga, like the Ramah is going to say in detail. That's the Ramah that we'll see Mir Hashem tomorrow. And now says the Ramah here in the parentheses, v'nagu lahakel, the minig is to be makel. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut 9 dalid, v'nagu pirish kisfara harishayna. What does it mean that we're noyig to be makel? It means that we're noyig to follow the first opinion, who says that a boiled or fried blila ava is a mezainos and an alamichya, not a hamaitzi or birkas hamazon. Pirish kisfara rishayna, the ein sark levarach hamaitzi, that we do not have to make hamaitzi v'shalosh brachos and birkas hamazon. Ayin hey lahakel, the minig is to go lekula. So the Chavetz Chaim brings down an interesting Magen Avram here. Kasav Magen Avram, the Magen Avram writes, to zeh dafka b'lo yachal kedei sevia. The Magen Avram says, when is it true that we're noyig to be makel and make a mezainos and an alamichya on these products? That's only if you didn't eat enough of this product to fill yourself up, to satiate yourself. Why? The chiyuv birkas hamazon shaloi hurak b'drabanan. Because remember, the pasuk by benching says, "Va'achalta," you'll eat, "V'achalta v'savata," and you'll be satisfied. "Uveirachta," and then you'll say birkas hamazon. So the chiyuv daraisa of benching is only when you eat your fill. So says the Magen Avram. Over here we have a suffix in din. We have two rishonim. We have two shittas in the rishonim over here of what to do with this boiled or fried belila ava product. We have the first shita that says that it's a mezainis and alamichya. We have a second shita that says it's hamaitzi and birkas hamazon. Well, says the Magen Avram, what kind of chiyuv of birkas hamazon are we dealing with? Are we dealing with a case where you ate kedei sevia? You ate your fill? In that case, the chiyuv of birkas hamazon would be a chiyuv daraisa. In that case, the suffix over here would be a suffix daraisa. If we're dealing with a suffix daraisa l'chumra, so you should have to bench. But if you did not eat your fill, then the chiyuv birkas hamazon would only be derabanan. If the chiyuv birkas hamazon is only derabanan, this is a suffix derabanan. Is it alamichya or benching? It's a suffix derabanan, because even on the tzad that it's benching, it's not kedei svia, so it's only a derabanan dika benching. Then suffix derabanan lekula. That's what the Magen Avram says. Let's see it inside. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Kasav Magen Avram, Dezeh dafka b'lo yachal kedei sevia. This that the Mechaber says that we're noyig to be makel is only if you didn't eat your fill of this kind of product. Why? The chiyuv birkas hamazon shaloi hurak b'drabanan. Because in that case, your chiyuv of benching, according to the more machmir second opinion, would only be a chiyuv d'rabanan. Lakach naktin kedei rishon l'hakel. So, since it's a suffix d'rabanan, we could go like the first opinion and we could be makel. Avo ba'akal kedei sevia. But if you chowed down on donuts on Hanukkah and you ate your fill, the chiyuv birkas hamazon hu midaraisa, now you're talking about potentially a chiyuv birkas hamazon midaraisa, so it's a suffix daraisa, tzarich levarach birkas hamazon misafik, then you would have to say suffix daraisa l'chumra. V'chein mashma mehagra, the gra is mashma like this Magen Avram as well. However, says the Mishnah Berurah, ach, kol zeh b'shah shalosh v'asa b'lilasei ava hayadaita lefais pas. But this whole discussion of the Magen Avram is only germane if when you needed this blila ava, you were intending on baking it. You see, if you needed a blila ava with the intent to bake it, then we could say that the dough got a shem lechem. And once the dough got a shem lechem, we could say that maybe when you fry it and you boil it, you don't take off the shem lechem, and therefore there could be a chiyuv of hamaitzi and birkas hamazon. So, ach kol zeh b'shah shalosh v'asa b'lilasei ava hayadaita lefais pas. You were mamish going to bake it into bread. And then you changed your mind and you made donuts. But if from the very outset over here, when you needed this dough, your intent was to fry donuts or boil up this dough, so then afilu achal kedei svia, in that case, even if you ate kedei svia, ein mevarach aleh birkas hamazon, we're not going to say suffix daraisa l'chumra, rak bracha achas be'ein shalosh, you're only going to make an alamichya. Why? Because in that case, it never got Torah's lechem. Even when you needed it into a blila ava, your intent always was to fry or to boil it, it never got Torah's lechem, and therefore, we're not going to say that there could be potentially daraisa to Chiyuv of benching. Now let's go back into the Mechaber 3 lines down in the middle. Says the Mechaber, what do we do? Lamaisa. The Mechaber says v'yirei shamayim yetze yedei shneim. A yirei shamayim should try to fulfill both opinions over here. How should he do that? V'lo yoichal, and he should not eat this boiled or fried blila ava ella al yedei sheyavarech alechem achar tchila, unless you wash on a piece of bread first. Ois kanayin vav yirei shamayim yetze. Hainu afilu b'shal yadaita b'shas blila lavasha l'latagan. Says the Mishnah Berurah, yirei shamayim, even if when the dough was kneaded, the intent was to fry it or to boil it. You shouldn't eat this unless you are going to wash on a regular piece of bread first. Now, I keep mentioning donuts. Our donuts are not what we're talking about over here. Our donuts are a blila ava. They're a thick dough. I'm talking about the donuts like the Hanukkah donuts. They're a thick dough. It's not a pourable batter. It's a blila ava, which we fry in a lot of oil, but they are pasabah b'kisnin. The reason they're pasabah b'kisnin is because they are kneaded with a tremendous amount of oil and egg and sugar. They're very sweet. That's mamish pasabah b'kisnin. So this wouldn't be, we wouldn't have a shiloh over here, I don't believe, on our donuts. Our fried donuts are certainly going to be a mezainos. I don't think anybody has to be afraid that they have to wash on a slice of bread before they eat donuts. Okay, we're going to stop over here for now. Mirza Hashem, next time we'll continue with the Hagah. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh should send Yeshua's refuahs parnassus shituchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Geula Shlema with the Bias Girl Tzedek B'Beher V'Yameinu. Amen. Be well.